So Woody Allen wrote and directed Crimes and Misdemeanors. He plays Cliff. He's the red-haired, geeky documentary filmmaker. He's kind of a sweet loser that we want to identify with. And he's kind of we want him to get the girl, but he doesn't, and we want him to be successful, but he isn't. But we like him because he's very funny, and like he's a sweet uncle. And for that reason, he's a kind of comic tragic character. So the film Crimes and Misdemeanors was released in 1989. It was a box office failure with a budget of $17 million, even though it only grossed $16.3 million. And it had immediate critical success, not popularity, right? That there's a big rift between what's popular versus what the critics like. And so it received Academy Award nominations and it won several film festival awards and like Screen Actors Guild awards and that kind of stuff. And indeed, I mean, history looks back fondly on Crimes and Misdemeanors as one of the great comedies of the 20th century, but in its day, it was a box office failure. Roger Ebert asserts that the implications of crimes and misdemeanors are bleak and hopeless, right? The film critic Roger Ebert says that the implications of the film Crimes and Misdemeanors are bleak and hopeless. And I think what he means by that are the kind of, the guilty prosper, whereas the innocent suffer. That is essential, and that there is no real value structure in reality that you can turn to for meaning. It's a nihilistic film in that sense. So, according to Roger Ebert, what are the implications of the film Crimes and Misdemeanors? What Ebert says is that the evil are rewarded and the blameless are punished. And this is represented in Judah's act of murder for hire, right? He has his mistress killed. And um, what happens is he calls his brother, who hires a hitman, who kills her because she was going to rat Judah out, as well as, I mean, to the wife for the affair, but also kind of make public Judah's indiscretions, his financial misdeeds, right? And so for that, Judah has her killed. And then Judah feels bad for a while, and he has a crisis of conscience, and indeed he even thinks about confessing. But he doesn't. And as days go by, things get better. He doesn't think about it, and indeed he prospers, and he's in the end he's super happy. And the kind of argument is that murder for hire is a good thing, or at least it can be a good thing. And the blameless being punished, well, that would be who's blameless in the film? I think Ben. Ben is the rabbi who is going blind. He's the conscience for Judah, and he's a really sweet guy. And so, what does he get for his troubles? Well, he loses his eyesight. And I think Cliff too, right? We are sympathetic to Cliff. He's the red-haired documentary geeky filmmaker whom I mean, we like him because he's funny, he's clever, he's a good uncle, and he cares about people, but he's a loser, he's a failure. And even though we want him to succeed, we kind of know he never can. So this idea of the evil are rewarded and the blameless are punished underscores the film. The film Crimes and Misdemeanors responds to the ideas of what classical author? Hint, he wrote Crime and Punishment. Well, of course, that's Fyodor Dostoevsky. And not only did he write Crime and Punishment, he wrote Brothers Karamazov and The Gambler and The Possessed and Notes from Underground and just one of the greatest writers in history, right? And that's who Woody Allen is playing with here. It's a kind of dilemma because what happens with Crime and Punishment is Raskolnikov kills a pawnbroker woman who we're not sympathetic to, and we can kind of shrug our shoulders and say, well, it's better that she was dead. But then what happens is the pawnbroker woman's sister walks in, and everybody likes her, and she's an innocent, and Raskolnikov kills her too, and so he feels guilty, and in the end, he confesses, right? Well, Dolores, the mistress, is not. I mean, that's Woody Allen's genius. That he wrote a kind of victim, right? The murdered mistress, who we're not particularly sympathetic to, because she's not the most desirable of characters, right? There's a kind of desperation and an attempt to blackmail. And we really, we like Judah and we don't really like her so much. But all right, so the answer is Fyodor Dostoevsky. He wrote Crime and Punishment. And indeed, Woody Allen, this theme comes up in several more of his films. What philosophy does the film Crimes and Misdemeanors speak to? Well, it's this idea of nihilism. And nihilism in a nutshell, right? You think Stanley Rosen, he wrote a great book called Nihilism, but nihilism really is the kind of brainchild of Nietzsche. And it's kind of asking the question, who makes up these values that we feel guilty for? With Freud's idea of the superego, who is this superego? Who has a right to say, this is good or that's bad. And nihilism, indeed, just speaks to, if not a valueless reality, a reality that sort of asserts that the values of the common communal society are dubious in certain ways. And we can, that if you're really strong, you can sort of get behind them, right? And be above them. What does Ben the Rabbi represent? Well, I already said so. The unfairness of fate, that bad things happen to good people. So fate can deal some lousy cards, even though you're a really nice person. When Cliff says that the main character in Judah's story should confess, what is Judah's response? Well, Judah says, you watch too many movies, right? So Cliff says, it would be perfect tragedy for him to confess because he feels so guilty, right? And the Judah's like, no way. That's, you watch too many movies. And this alignment or the misalignment really between art and reality, or what we want reality to look like but doesn't. And I think, in a way, this is Woody Allen's genius here, right? I mean, to what extent do we want art to be reality and vice versa? All right, very good.